and welcome back to part 3 of session 3. This will be the final part of this session. This session will focus on examining the results of DigiSRII in detail for a specific economy. The objective of this session is to provide a step-by-step guide for users to evaluate economy-specific performance. The approach used in this session can be applied flexibly to any economy included in the sample. The approach used will evaluate an economy's progress in overall regional integration, while also providing insight into its performance in conventional and sustainable integration independently. Furthermore, detailed dimensional analysis will also be undertaken for a selected dimension. It is to be noted that the same approach can be easily applied to any of the 7 dimensions based on user requirements. In our example, we choose Vietnam. The procedure is as follows. In step 1, examine the performance of the economy in overall regional integration. In step 2, examine the performance of the economy in conventional versus sustainable integration. In step 3, examine the performance of the economy in different dimensions of regional integration, both conventional and sustainable. Steps 1 through 3 help to build a picture of an economy's performance in regional integration at the overall index level, including conventional and sustainable perspectives and dimensions. In step 4, examine the performance of the economy in a specific dimension of DigiSRII. In step 5, examine the performance of the economy in the chosen dimension using conventional versus sustainable integration. In step 6, examine the performance of the economy across all indicators in the chosen dimension, both conventional and sustainable. Finally, in step 7, compare performance in a chosen indicator across all other economies. Steps 4 through 7 paint a picture of an economy's performance in a specific dimension, covering conventional and sustainable perspectives as well as indicators. We begin with step 1, that is, examining the performance of Vietnam in overall regional integration. The results are based on the simplified version of DigiSRII. Vietnam is placed towards the top of the group of average performers in the region. It stands out in terms of how fast it has deepened its level of regional integration between 2010 and 2017, moving from being slightly above the regional average in 2010 to 13 to well above it in 2014 to 17. In terms of level, Vietnam ranked among the 8 most integrated economies in the region. We then move to step 2, examining conventional versus sustainable integration for Vietnam. The results are based on the comprehensive version of DigiSRII. While Vietnam is an average performer in conventional regional integration, it is among the least integrated from a sustainable perspective. This suggests that considerations for sustainable development have not kept pace with Vietnam's regional integration objectives. Nonetheless, it performs well in terms of progress over time, both in conventional and sustainable integration. This brings us to step 3, examining the performance of Vietnam across the 7 dimensions. At the outset, it is important to highlight that the pink dots refer to the Asia-Pacific average dimensional values for the period 2010 to 2013, that is, the first period, and the purple dots refer to the Asia-Pacific average dimensional values for 2014 to 17, the second period. The red dots correspond to Vietnam's dimensional value for the first period, while blue dots correspond to its dimensional value in the latter. Across conventional dimensions, the comparatively better infrastructure integration and regulatory cooperation with regional economies are the most important conventional factors for Vietnam's overall performance in regional integration, reflecting the overall Asia-Pacific trend. However, a distinct difference in dimensional contribution for Vietnam compared to the Asia-Pacific average is for trade and investment. Vietnam performs considerably better in this dimension compared to the average of Asia-Pacific, reflecting Vietnam's position as a top performer in this dimension. In terms of progress over time, the improvement in regulatory cooperation and financial integration at the regional level has driven the economy's progress in regional integration over the period 2010 to 2017. While Vietnam made significant progress in most dimensions of conventional integration, the score on movement of people remained very small and static. This trend of limited and stagnant integration in movement of people is general across the Asia-Pacific region. Turning now to sustainable regional integration in Vietnam, sustainable finance and sustainable infrastructure are the most important dimensions for Vietnam, contributing the most towards its overall level of sustainable integration, similar to the overall Asia-Pacific trend. This implies that sustainable financial as well as infrastructure integration with regional economies have been the major contributors towards Vietnam's overall level of sustainable regional integration. However, Vietnam does considerably worse than the Asia-Pacific average in sustainable value chain integration, placing it as one of the bottom performers in the region for this dimension. In terms of change, sustainable regulatory cooperation and sustainable infrastructure are the most important dimensions. This indicates that sustainable integration in regulatory cooperation and infrastructure played a major role in increasing Vietnam's sustainable regional integration over the period 2010 to 2017. Comparing this to the trend seen in the Asia-Pacific region as a whole indicates that Vietnam has made above average progress in increasing its sustainable regulatory cooperation between 2010 and 2017. We then move on to step 4, examining Vietnam's performance in a selected dimension. We choose dimension 7, digital economy integration. The analysis is based on the comprehensive index. Vietnam is placed towards the bottom of the group of average performers in the region. It performs moderately well in terms of progress made between 2010 and 2017, although remaining below the regional average for both periods. On to step 5, examining regional versus sustainable digital economy integration. The slide shows a comparative analysis of the progress made in conventional versus sustainable digital economy integration. The analysis here is based on the comprehensive index. Vietnam is placed towards the bottom of the group of average performers in both conventional and sustainable digital economy integration. This brings us to step 6, examining performance across indicators in the dimension of digital economy integration. As shown in the previous figures, digital economy integration remains one of the most important weaknesses in the regional integration of Vietnam. Looking closer into this dimension, reveals that the bottlenecks are particularly in the relatively limited use of online transactions, shown by online purchases indicator, and also the relatively restricted and diverse digital trade policy environment, shown by the digital regulatory similarity indicator. Although investment in hard infrastructure may partially help, enabling regulatory environment is the most important weakness. Reducing digital trade restrictions and harmonizing digital trade rules and regulations with major regional partners will allow the country to better integrate. While Vietnam made good progress in improving household internet and women's access to mobile accounts, it still lags behind the regional average. More generally, in sustainable digital economy integration, Vietnam's scores are relatively low in most indicators, falling below the regional average. Finally, we arrive at step 7, comparing the performance of Vietnam against other regional economies based on ICT tariffs, which happens to be its most important indicator of the dimension. In terms of ICT tariffs, Vietnam is placed in the group of average performers, making modest progress in terms of change over time. It performs above the regional average for both periods. This finding clarifies Vietnam's average conventional digital economy integration, as its performance in its key driving indicator is average in comparison to other regional economies. As a result, there remains room for improvement for Vietnam in its performance in ICT tariffs. Similarly, we evaluate the performance of Vietnam in one of its main indicators for sustainable digital economy integration, namely household internet. Vietnam is placed towards the bottom of the group of average performers, making modest progress in terms of change over time. It performs below the regional average for both periods. This finding clarifies Vietnam's average sustainable digital economy integration, as its performance in a key driving indicator is towards the bottom end of average in comparison to other regional economies. Thus, the economy has significant room for improvement in this indicator of inclusive access to digital economy infrastructure. Thank you very much for watching.